The messages didn't feel dangerous at first. They were warm, affectionate, almost comforting. The kind of words people write when they believe they finally found someone who understands them. Late at night, long conversations stretch for hours, filled with promises and quiet confessions. But something about them felt rehearsed. The tone was perfect, almost too perfect, as if every sentence had been carefully chosen to say exactly what the other person needed to hear. The relationship moved quickly, faster than anyone around them expected. Emotions deepened in a matter of weeks, not months, and that would become the first quiet warning. Because real relationships rarely feel that effortless. At the time, no one questioned it. From the outside, it looked like two adults forming a connection online, slowly building trust across distance. But behind the affection was a subtle imbalance. One person growing emotionally dependent, the other carefully guiding the conversation. The man at the center of this story was Bruce Miller, a mechanic from Michigan trying to rebuild his life after personal struggles. The online connection offered something he hadn't felt in a long time: attention, understanding, and the promise of something new. On the other side of those messages was Sharee Miller, a woman whose words felt deeply personal, almost magnetic. Conversations with her felt intimate and immediate, as if she already understood him long before they had met face-to-face. To Bruce, it felt like fate. To investigators later, it would feel very different. As their conversations continued, Bruce opened up more. He shared details about his frustrations, his hopes, and pieces of his life he rarely discussed with others. The emotional attachment grew stronger, fueled by constant contact and promises about a future together. But small inconsistencies began to appear. Stories that shifted slightly, details that didn't always match, questions that felt unusually specific, as if someone was learning more than they were revealing. Still, emotional connection has a way of quieting doubt. When people want to believe something is real, they ignore the signs that don't fit. What Bruce didn't realize was that the relationship existed within a much larger web, one involving secrecy, personal conflict, and hidden motivations that would only become clear later. The digital world made everything easier to shape. Messages could be rewritten, identities carefully crafted. Reality itself could be controlled. As weeks passed, the emotional stakes grew higher. Conversations became more urgent. The relationship felt intense, almost consuming. Plans were discussed. Decisions were made quickly. The emotional pressure began rising in ways that neither of them seemed able to slow down. People close to the situation would later describe the energy as strange, intense, unpredictable. But no one could have guessed how quickly things were about to change. Because tragedies rarely arrive loudly. They slip into ordinary moments unnoticed. One day, Bruce received instructions that seemed simple enough. A request that felt urgent but not dangerous. Something he believed was helping someone he cared about. He followed them, and within hours, everything changed. News spread fast. A man was dead. Investigators were called to a crime scene that immediately raised questions. The circumstances felt unusual. The timeline unclear. The motivation uncertain. Nothing about it seemed entirely random. As detectives began piecing together the events, they noticed something that didn't fit. The trail didn't start at the scene itself. It started earlier, online, with messages. Messages that once felt affectionate now carried a different tone. Conversations that seemed romantic began looking calculated. And as investigators followed those digital exchanges, a disturbing possibility started to take shape. What if the relationship itself had never been real? Once investigators began reading through the messages, the tone changed completely. What had looked like romance from the outside started to feel calculated under investigation. Conversations weren't just emotional, they were directional. Certain questions appeared again and again, specific requests, carefully framed emotions. Detectives noticed something unsettling almost immediately. The relationship seemed designed to influence behavior. As they dug deeper, they discovered that Bruce had been receiving instructions, advice disguised as concern, suggestions wrapped in affection, messages that appeared loving but quietly pushed him towards certain actions. The more they read, the more uncomfortable the pattern became. Investigators realized they weren't just looking at a relationship. They were looking at psychological control. For Bruce, the emotional connection felt genuine. Friends later said he believed he was protecting someone he cared about, someone he thought needed help. His decisions were shaped by trust, the kind of trust that grows when someone feels emotionally needed. But investigators began to wonder, had that trust been manufactured? As digital records expanded, another layer of the story emerged. There were inconsistencies in Sharee's explanations, details that didn't line up with the timeline. Some messages appeared rehearsed. Others seemed written to provoke fear or urgency. The emotional tone shifted constantly. Affection followed by distress, reassurance followed by pressure, a push-and-pull dynamic. Psychologists who later reviewed the case would describe it as a classic pattern of manipulation. Creating emotional dependency, then using that dependency to influence behavior. And as investigators pieced everything together, a chilling realization surfaced. The online relationship may have never been what Bruce believed it was. Behind the affectionate messages was a carefully crafted narrative, one that shaped how he saw reality itself. Fear was introduced slowly, urgency increased over time, decisions were encouraged under emotional pressure, making them feel like acts of loyalty rather than choices. And that made the investigation far more complicated. Because when someone believes they are helping a loved one, they may not realize they are being guided towards something dangerous. Detectives reconstructed the timeline step by step. Messages were sent. Responses followed quickly. Events unfolded almost exactly as described in the conversations. It was as if the outcome had been planned long before it happened. The more evidence surfaced, the clearer the psychological picture became. This wasn't simply a case about violence. It was a case about influence, about how words written through a screen could quietly reshape someone's decisions. Investigators began focusing on motive. What was driving the person behind those messages? Financial gain? Emotional control? Fear of losing power in a personal situation? The answers pointed toward a complicated emotional landscape: jealousy, insecurity, and the desire to control outcomes that felt unpredictable. For Bruce, the realization came too late. By the time the truth began emerging, the damage had already been done. The relationship he believed in started to look like something entirely different, a carefully constructed illusion that had pulled him into reality he never fully understood. As authorities continued uncovering evidence, public attention grew. The case shocked people not just because of the crime, but because of how ordinary it had seemed in the beginning. There were no dramatic warning signs, no obvious villains, just conversations, messages, words that slowly changed someone's perception of the world. The investigation eventually painted a clearer picture of what had happened. A chain of events influenced by emotional manipulation and hidden motives. But even with answers, the story remained unsettling, because it forced a difficult question. How well do we really know the people we trust online? And how easily can emotion override logic when someone feels seen, understood, and needed? When the case finally reached its conclusion, the details revealed a disturbing truth. The most dangerous part of the story had never been physical violence alone. It had been psychological influence, the ability to shape someone's decisions without them ever realizing it. For investigators, the case became a reminder that modern crimes often begin long before the moment of violence. They begin quietly, through conversations, emotional dependency, and gradual control. And for those looking back, the signs seemed obvious only in hindsight. The messages that felt too perfect, the urgency that kept escalating, the relationship that moved faster than reality could sustain. Even today, the case continues to leave people unsettled, not just because of what happened, but because of what it reveals about human vulnerability. Behind every screen is a person, but sometimes the person we think we're talking to isn't who they appear to be. And sometimes the most dangerous stories don't begin with violence. They begin with words,